This episode of Inspire AI podcast is sponsored by Exponent 21. I keep hearing the same thing from business leaders lately. We're doing the work, but leads are harder to explain. Traffic is down, attribution feels fuzzy, and the old answers don't really fit anymore. What's changed is how people search. Instead of clicking links, people are asking questions, and AI is answering them. Tools like ChatGPT, Google's AI-powered results, and Perplexity are shaping which brands get mentioned, referenced, and remembered. Exponent 21 specializes in AI SEO. They help businesses understand how to show up consistently inside those AI-generated answers across questions about their industry, their services, and their brand. What stands out to me is that when people ask AI tools, who's leading in this space? Exponent 21 and its leaders are often referenced near the top. That comes from doing the work and shaping how this new search environment actually functions. To understand what this shift means for your business, visit exponent21.com. Welcome back to Inspire AI, the podcast where we help leaders, builders, and communities stay capable and intentional in an AI-accelerated world. Today's episode is a special one for me personally. I'm joined by Tianzhen Lin, someone I've had the privilege of learning from for years, and without question, one of the most technically rigorous thinkers I know. Tianzhen isn't just fluent in AI systems. He's disciplined about how thinking happens around him. While much of the conversation in AI today is dominated by prompts, tools, and surface-level productivity gains, Tianzhen has been quietly focused on something deeper and far more important: judgment, accountability, and workflow design. In a world where intelligence is cheap, but correctness is not. He has a rare ability to take deeply technical realities, how large language models actually behave, where they fail and why, and translate them into mental models that leaders can use, not to move faster blindly, but to reduce risk, increase reliability, and build systems that hold up over time. And on a personal note, Tianzhen has been a mentor to me, not just in the technical depth, but in how to think about systems, trade-offs, and long-term consequences. He's someone who constantly pushes for clearer reasoning, stronger foundations, and better design, and who believes that real progress comes from challenging each other to think more rigorously. Many of the ways I approach AI today, especially around systems thinking, continuous learning, and building structures that help people grow rather than cut corners, have been shaped by years of conversations with him. In this episode, we're not talking about hype. We're not talking about shortcuts. We're talking about what it actually takes to lead responsibly when AI becomes ambient, when assistance is everywhere, but accountability still rests with humans. If you care about building systems you can trust, leading teams through uncertainty, and staying grounded as the pace of change accelerates, this conversation is for you. Tianzhen, welcome to Inspire AI.
Well, thank you for having me.
Outstanding. Can you tell us a little bit about your background, what brings you here today?
Yes, absolutely. My pleasure being here. So I've been a software engineer for a good number of years. I've worked in different startup and also have a privilege to work in big tech, Capital One, Amazon, and Facebook. I have a passion of building software, and most recently I realized that instead of spending a lot of late night hours troubleshooting, learning about writing code, AI can accelerate that. The more that I use, the more flaws I see, some of the blind spots we have with AI, but also I realized that a lot of opportunities that we can harvest, we use it correctly. It can actually accelerate us building what we love and what we want to bring to the humanity.
Yeah, that sounds great. Bringing our passion to humanity is something we all strive for with identifying with our purpose. I resonate with that. So I've heard you argue that prompting often fails, and you compare it to building a sandcastle. What's the core misunderstanding that teams have about working with LLMs that makes failure almost inevitable?
Yeah, a lot of times that we have seen some of these magical output, maybe from a blog post or maybe from someone else, that you can whistle a small sentence and the AI can come back with an example that, or some code that works and looks like, my goodness, this would have taken me a day or even longer for that. Problem is that our work does not stop there, because once you build a software, it's not a software that's going to keep running for the next 10, 20 years. We're going to keep making modification here, making changes there. So, and therefore making changes on a prompt that you have written about a day or two ago, or even a couple of hours ago, becomes increasingly difficult. It is almost like if AI come back to you is in a large document, and then you have about 15, 20 paragraphs, and you have to describe, I make a change, I want to make change in this very sentence, and so on and so forth. Things are gradually becoming going sideways in many ways. And then therefore, not only that you're not really guiding the AI in the way that you want, but also some other times that AI could start creating new requirement or hallucinating things using a function that doesn't exist, or using a library that you think that is not shouldn't be there, or missing a security queue here and there. Yeah, so that's kind of where I usually see where the prompt fails, and we spend more time course correcting an AI than actually getting AI to do meaningful work.
True. Yeah. With the proliferation of these AI tools, I expect many folks are going to be running into these problems. And if they haven't seen it yet, it's a great opportunity here to tune in to what you're saying. So tell us, I think you describe LLMs as an eager intern, right? And it's helpful, fast, but not accountable. How does adopting that mental model change how leaders should think about responsibility, trust, and risk?
Absolutely. There are a few things that you can equate AI to, because, and some of that is just how AI is being tuned out of the box. So you can imagine an AI, it's like a very knowledgeable intern who has read everything from the best materials, best PhD paper, and so on and so forth. But here are a couple problems that you have to realize is that, first of all, when an AI make a mistake, it's not the AI's problem. You are still ultimately the one being held accountable for it. If AI slip in a algorithm problem and it causes financial institution miscalculated billing or things like that, it's not the AI's problem, because it's still you who being held accountable for. And two is getting to the even more of a core of a problem, which is AI tuned out of the box is more of just like an eager intern and try to please you by saying yes to everything that you ask for, and start filling the assumptions because they are afraid of telling you what they assume, what they don't know. And therefore, you don't get the pushback needed. So imagine when you hire a very seasonal consultant or someone very knowledgeable. When they come in, they actually ask you more questions than what you actually ask them to do, because they're really trying to understand the history of things and context of how the business is built, what you're really trying to achieve, and spell out every single assumptions or even challenge your thinking, is that a good or bad way. So I think that's a big difference between an intern mentality and someone who's very senior and very seasonal.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like we're shifting from traditional prompt engineering to what might be considered context engineering.
That's correct. So because a lot of things that context matters.
Hmm.
And context is a very interesting thing. You can treat it more like a finite resource, even though you can hear context windows such as 100K, 200K, or Anthropic just recently dropped a model with 1 million context window, and Google Gemini boasts about 2 million context window. But the truth of the fact is that if you remember Bill Gates many years back, that no one used over 640 kilobytes. He has not quite foreseen that the more that you throw at people, the more they want to get out of it. So the context window is always a very finite resource that you have to kind of work with.
Yep.
And using this resource is like a Goldilocks problem. You give it too little, and they start making a lot of assumptions. But if you give it too much, you actually get into a problem called like the loss in the middle problem, which is a 2023 paper. So if
Yep.
you have a very, very long prompt, talk about many things. And out of the 10 documents you paste in, the fifth one is talking about some key security principle that AI should not forget. Guess what? That's very likely get glimpsed over and get forgotten towards the end.
Yep, I remember reading that paper a little over a year ago. That's an interesting one. I recommend it. So you repeatedly emphasize prefer durable artifacts over chat history. Why do specs, plans, and docs suddenly become more valuable to an AI assisted world and not less?
Yeah, so I think we've all been there many times when we use AI to build code. Let's dial back a little bit of the context. The longer you have a chat session open, the more of the context window being used. And over time, you kind of exhaust all of the context window. Even today, AI can automatically compact the window, free up some space again. But then you're at the mercy of AI automatically cherry pick the key information that you really care about and hopefully compact that. So you're preying on a magic that may or may not happen.
Right.
Therefore, we're coming back to the context as a finite resource. So the good practice is generally once you finish getting your goal done, exit that and start over again.
Refresh the chat window.
Exactly. So you have a fresh set of context window. But here's a problem. It is like hiring a new intern every other hour. And every intern is going to have a whole new context you have to feed again. It does not remember what is said before. Or something durable is more important. Just think about when you run an enterprise, unless you have someone work with you 30 years and remember everything you have said, but you're likely going to onboard new employees. And what do you have left for them that they can read, they can get up to speed quickly? So these durable assets become very important. Now, surely you can say, here's my Slack chat history from the last couple months, and please read through them. But we probably don't persist that well. We can treat history as more like an ephemeral asset. A durable asset is like things that you have organized, you have distilled down so that you don't have to re-explain it every single time, which is more important for AI because now AI becomes such an easy resource that you can onboard on a very frequent basis. And therefore, having some of these assets, such as your spec, your architectural decision, and a lot of things that can be good that you can refer to AI so you don't have to re-explain. Instead of wasting your energy to re-explain things, now you have durable assets. If you manage it correctly, it turns the AI into a confused partner because of lack of context, or maybe sometimes it's overfed with way too much raw material into a focus worker because they understand and read your blueprint. Again, the blueprint is a condensed version of everything. And going back to the very same thing about a context window is how you effectively give just enough in your context window so that the AI can actually perform great work.
That's fantastic.
So I actually have a very good personal experience with things. So I have a code base with a very nice set of documentation written and generated along with AI that I constantly refer AI to, and a lot of magic moment usually happens. For example, I can see a bug's coming in and paraphrase a bug and even have AI to rewrite a bug. And then have Claude Code read the Jira ticket. And because I already have context how the software being written, all the trade-off, all of the convention we have with the software, and it actually fix the bug, how would I fix that?
Wow.
And we also have software written in the pre-AI phase that doesn't have this set of documentations. And I noticed the performance dramatically drop with that. Not only churn through more tokens, it generally start to hallucinate. It's not capable of making good decision. Even I would ask it to give me a plan or ask me for ambiguity, but I noticed that the AI just constantly need a lot more nudging to get the work done correctly. So I've gone through this personal experience that really lead me to realize it's a good set of documentations and good set of durable artifacts. It's very important for your AI to stay focused and perform well.
So I'm picking up on a pattern here. It sounds like you're pretty strict about breaking work into small, verifiable steps. So why does decomposition matter more with LLMs than it did with the traditional software teams?
Yeah, and we start with the context window as a finite resource. The more complex that task, the more context it has to churn through. So breaking up a task would allow you to leverage this resource more effectively. Now, some would argue that maybe over time that the AI is smart enough to start breaking it down and run with it and clear a context window every single step, which I've done recently and actually achieved some good results of it after that. Another dimension of this is less on just the context windows, is more on risk management.
Mm,
Because as you have all these things laid out or these things broken down, without some supervision, you're actually enlarging the number of degree of freedoms. So this degree of freedom, what does that really mean?
right,
Is that you're giving more room for someone to improvise.
right.
You actually knowing it could be picking a library or using a CSS that you don't like, or using a practice you don't like, maybe using a database that you already wrote out. It's not something that you want to
Hmm.
go for. Each degree of freedom give AI a room to wander off.
Huh.
But by
Yeah,
breaking it down is that it's not you don't trust that, but you also verify it in every single give you step an early verification to realize that are you really is the train staying on track or is it going off the wrong direction? And it gives you a lot more room to course correct and start establishing patterns so that the AI can stay on the rail versus wandering off. Again, because of the context window issues, AI sometimes just like an intern that can get a squirrel moment and get distracted.
for sure. So we've talked about offline the usefulness of specs these days, and they're hard to maintain, right? Specs are often seen as just pure process overhead. How does writing a spec, especially one an LLM will use, actually increase the speed and alignment instead of slowing teams down?
A good spec, the amount of time you put writing a good spec, it's pretty much the amount of time you would have spent and speed your execution and spend time debug later. It's whether you pay your debt upfront or you pay your back debt later. Good specification also allow you to clearly think of what you need ahead of time. I'm not talking about waterfall here. It's basically clear your understanding. Because a lot of time when I see that in a lot of software and product management is that when a spec is not clear and people get suboptimal results, who is that to blame? Is that the implementation problem because of intelligence of the engineering community? Or is it just something they have been given too vague for them or too much degree of freedom or not specific enough so that they actually build a solution and not really addressing the most pressing needs of it, they may over-index on things that actually don't matter. So spec allow you to really giving that a clear brush of what you want to do and clearly laid it out and also clarify a lot of the assumption that you have been taking advantage of because you have all those context already in your brain that other people do not inherit.
Yeah, filling in a lot of gaps that I've had before today's conversation.
Yeah.
This is awesome.
I want to give another example, an interesting experience that I have recently with a spec. Good specification actually can come with many, many different benefits. So we were working late night on this rush piece of software. And in the middle of building that, we realized some new requirements come in and some reality come in that completely flipped over our original assumption how it should be written. And I realized that this is great because I actually have a very long written spec that is completely agnostic how we implement it, so how the system should behave. So go back to the LLM and say, forget about what we've written, but let's look back at spec. And if I change, instead of this volume of data, we now have 10 times the volume of data spread all over in different resources. We initially envisioned this would be only a 10-second delay when bootstrapping the application. This now will be one, how you would have designed it differently.
Mm-hmm.
AI start looking into the spec and say, well, you should move this data ingestion from this part of our process to another part of our process. And these are three options I think that you should evaluate. And then the very next 3 hours is when the magic happens. We ideate different approaches. We really kind of make sure that AI can explain every single option and make sure it is going correctly. And AI actually just rewrite a spec and rewrite the software because it also has an architectural blueprint of a software. So no, instead of completely rewrite everything, actually know where to move the code and where it changed. And I ended up having a software that pretty much nearly bugless during the transition, which would have taken days and days of engineering time, that magic happened within 3 hours. Kind of helped me understand is that sometimes having a spec, not only it is there as a documentation you can refer to, but it also makes some part of a decision become a two-way door that you can reverse some of the decision and change it because situation has changed. So it's not a waterfall, and someone actually make your process become more agile because you have a very nice source of truth you can patch or create from, modify them from that can be and still have an elegant result.
Yeah, no, I read a lot these days on success stories about using this, that, or the other AI tool and saving hours, days, weeks, months of developer time. And some of it's overblown, I'll be honest. But when you say it, I 100% believe it. You and I have talked also about verification. It's a line that you just don't cross. What's the most dangerous illusion teams fall into when AI generated work looks correct, but really isn't?
Yes, because I think it comes down to how AI is being trained. AI is called a large language model. It's being trained on our language. It's being motivated by observing a pattern of how we use our language and mimic that. And therefore, sometimes it may have understanding of what the language is, but most of the time it doesn't. Very good at generating formatted text that looks legit at a first glimpse. But the devils are usually in the details. I've gone through that lesson many, many times when I glimpse over a huge wall of text and I think the first 2 lines look good, the last 10 lines look good, and let me give a stamp of approval. Next thing I realize the software doesn't work. And I cannot just say, well, because I use Claude Code, but because I'm the manager of the output of an AI,
You're accountable. Yep.
ultimately I'm the one accountable for that. And that puts more pressure on verifying and making sure that this resource that come and go, because we open up a whole new chat session every time, that we pay no insurance for, we're still ultimately responsible for its own outcome.
Yeah. Okay. You're consistently framing documentation as a way to reduce future context load. So, how does leaving these artifacts behind change what teams and future AI sessions are capable of, let's say, 6 months from now?
Yeah, so we talk a little bit about exactly how you want things being built. Documentation is a reflection how it is being built. Basically, it's a sibling asset as your source code. Imagine a world we only have spec, but without the documentation. And then therefore, what it forces AI to do is they read the spec and then they have to churn through a lot of lines of source code, which is some of its work and some is well documented, some other work that could be human patched around. Then that means a lot more files that AI has to go through, which will eat up the context window. Again, context window is a finite resource. And then the more context window is being consumed, the more AI will get distracted and actually get derailed from the original, either some of the discipline you mentioned before, or some of the goal it has to attain to, or even some of the source code has glimpsed over before because of the loss in the middle effect. So imagine documentation is like a hyper condensed version or cliff note of your source code and correctly representing the state of the implementation without actually overblowing that with every single lines of detail, only highlighting what's important. And a good documentation does not mean you have to write down every line of source code, but say, if you want to know about this is the portion of source code you can get to. And therefore, it can be at its own discretion to say, well, this is relevant to my work. Let me go and read what's necessary instead of being forced to read end to end. Because anytime when AI today churn through a documentation, they will have to read all the file end to end because it does not know what to select and what not. And having a documentation can help AI to be selective and prioritize its own resource.
So, when you say documentation, you mean functional documentation of how this system works or is supposed to work?
Yeah, there are a lot of details you can go into documentations. The state of implementation, for example, I have this 50 files of code, how they're being divided, what are the architectural patterns being go into it,
Mm,
some of the trade-off that we have. For example,
right.
a reason work has to do with we have to make some trade-off between performance and precision. So I have to constantly, without our documentations, will be difficult for AI because let's just say that we have a piece of data grid that's going to display a lot of data. Usually when AI is being trained is that, well, the data grid only showed about first 50 records of data, but our decision is this data grid actually holds about 1 million records, all in the memory. So therefore, the processing that go into it, if we're not careful about it, AI can actually write a code to loop through from one to the end in one shot and actually practically will freeze the UI. And then we basically have to come back and help AI to understand that, well, these are some of the trade-offs we have in order to handle this volume of data.
Right.
And please follow this particular pattern. These are things that generally a lot harder for someone to just read the source code and understand it because just from a prompt coming back and say, well, I would like you to do so and so forth with a data set that I have. But knowing that this is a 1 million records that should be handled very differently from some common scenario. So having that documentation would document some of these nuisance or unconventional approach, or some other times are just pure decision of trade-off to you trade some one off from the other, and documentation will provide that level of guidelines.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like there's a lot of consequences to not providing the right documentation.
That's correct.
And if I think about it, like when an organization adopts the LLMs, but not this kind of workflow, what would you say are some of the failure modes they're setting themselves up for?
I've been through that before, and I feel like I'm building a sandcastle.
Mm.
It looks good. It looks great on a sunny day when it's first built, and the moment when a tidal wave comes in, it's gone. So I don't believe in, unless that's our intention for one day show, and AI can accelerate you building that. But I think over time, we're building a skyscraper. We need a solid foundation. And we need the discipline, and discipline does not mean it's one magical prompt that can get to. It's a lot of engineering rigor. Sometimes it's exciting, sometimes can be boring, but rigor will help you create a concrete foundation and guardrail that can gradually up-level your enterprise one level at a time. Because AI has been very good at churning out a lot of code, and sometimes I find that AI is eager to churn out more code than I actually wanted. Does not really mean you're accomplishing your goal. You actually, through this process, if not careful, you actually lose institutional knowledge. Why this decision is being made, why this framework is being used, what are the trade-offs we have with all these finite resources where we should be optimizing our decision towards. And a lot of knowledge key for one AI to handle to another for a newer generation of AI piggyback on top of the older generation, meaning that you have knowledge upgrade of how you would have tackled a problem differently. So then instead of leaving with very little institutional knowledge, you're actually accumulating knowledge, which is a key part for the future AI or your future virtual coworker in many different ways to have a knowledge you can build upon. I look at this more like process over prompt. Prompt is only a snapshot of what you have done, but the process is the one to endure over time. And AI does not diminish the traditional engineering excellence or a good process. What I actually find out is that AI actually amplify the penalty of not having this discipline. Because traditionally, it takes a long time from the moment having a thought to work it down and change and have the engineering team engineer the software and then see the end result. And by the time it's many, many months from the time that I have the idea, now this time frame is completely compressed. Where I find that a good discipline would yield a good result. And this is almost like eating our own karma of some of the homework we didn't do before. And now we actually end up seeing that down the road.
So stepping back, what does this workflow say about the kind of leaders and teams we will need as intelligence becomes a commodity?
I think in the end, it's not about just getting a result. It's more about how do we improve the reliability of the result that we can also over time scale these reliable results. And a lot of this is not about the prompt or it's not about just one or two assumption or one or two magical moment. It's about all these recurring rigors on making assumption explicit. And You beat over the spec and make sure the spec is correct. And also, even with the spec is being correct, you verify your outcome. All of these are key disciplines that enabling the AI to stay within the guardrail, creating a pattern that the future AI or future thinking partner can continue to follow and build a level up your enterprise. So a lot of these part is to bringing AI in as a very knowledgeable resource, turning them from always saying yes to what you're asking for into a critical thinker. Because the moment you invite them as a critical thinker, you open up yourself, open up your assumption that you actually, not only they churn out the output that you need, they actually go back to your original idea and offer you insights and ideas, and even blind spot you have not considered about because they have read through a lot of good materials, a lot of things that actually could have added to your idea, but they're not tuned to give you that input unless being asked for. Some of these good use will amplify the outcome. And I always look into that is AI is an accelerator of, or amplifier of what your discipline, what is your management style is. And if an organization management style is more leaning on go do it instead of let's take a pause and think about it and verify what we have. And just start imagining the analogy of the intern. If you have a very vague idea and turn it out to the intern come around and produce a result, not what you're looking for. I don't think that's an issue of the intelligence of the intern is actually the quality of the management problem. So I look at that is the quality of outcome is a reflection of your management style and how you manage the resource and how you manage the clarity, not the model's intelligence. So in the end, you're still in the driver's seat. It's how you take this accelerator, making sure that it aim in the right direction and take your enterprise off to the space.
There it is. That's amazing. Well, thank you, Tianzhen. I've learned so much from you today.
Thank you, Jason. You prompted very insightful questions. I learned a lot. You're like a super intelligence AI to probe into things I've learned and force me to even think about how I should explain this. And a lot of that I start verifying my own assumptions too.
Yeah, we work well together. My imponderables turn into real actions between us. I think it's great.
Thank you.
All right, folks. As I like to say, until next time, stay curious, keep innovating, and lead with judgment as intelligence becomes ever more abundant. Cheers.
Cheers.